The October wind swept across the Wyoming territory as Thomas McKenzie stood on the wooden platform of Clearwater Station. At 35, his weathered face bore the lines of a man who had spent his life working the land under an unforgiving sky. "Should be here any minute now, Tom," called out Pete Morrison, the station agent. "Got word from Cheyenne that the stage left on time." Thomas nodded, adjusting his best white cotton shirt. After 2 years of correspondence with Sarah Patterson of Chicago, she was finally coming to Wyoming to become his wife. Their letters had grown from formal introductions to warm exchanges about hopes for the future. The distant rumble of hooves announced the stagecoach's approach. Thomas's heart beat faster as the red and gold coach rolled into view. Pulled by 6 tired horses, the coach stopped with a jolt and cloud of dust. Thomas stepped forward, removing his hat. Jake Thompson, the driver, climbed down with practiced ease. "Afternoon, Tom," Jake said, wiping dust from his face. "Got a passenger for you, but, well, you'd better brace yourself." The coach door opened. Instead of the blonde Sarah Patterson he expected, a young woman with auburn hair and green eyes emerged slowly, favoring her left leg. Her travel dress was rumpled, and she clutched a small carpet bag. "Mr. McKenzie?" she asked, her voice carrying an Irish accent. "I'm Margaret O'Sullivan. I have a message from Sarah Patterson." Thomas felt his stomach drop. "Ma'am, you look hurt. Are you all right?" Margaret's composure began to crack. "I twisted my ankle in Laramie. But Mr. McKenzie, I have difficult news about Sarah." She changed her mind. "She met someone on the train to Chicago, a banker. They were married 3 days ago." The words hit Thomas hard, but years of frontier disappointment had taught him to absorb bad news without visible reaction. He simply nodded. "She asked me to come and explain in person because she couldn't bear to send just a telegram," Margaret continued. She felt terrible about the situation. "I was traveling west looking for work as a schoolteacher, so I offered to bring her message and apologies." Jake cleared his throat. "Tom, I need to be moving along. Miss O'Sullivan's bag is up top." Thomas looked at Margaret, noting the pain in her eyes, physical and emotional. "Miss O'Sullivan, do you have a place to stay in Clearwater?" Margaret shook her head. "I plan to inquire at the hotel, though." She glanced at her modest dress and small bag. Thomas made a quick decision. "Ma'am, you've come all this way to deliver difficult news. The least I can do is offer you a place to recover. My ranch isn't fancy, but it's clean and warm." "Mr. McKenzie, I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition," Thomas interrupted gently. "You're injured and far from home. I have a spare room, and my housekeeper would never forgive me if I let an injured woman fend for herself." Margaret studied his face, finding only genuine concern. "If you're certain, just until my ankle heals." "It's settled then," Thomas said to as they began the 5-mile journey to his ranch. Margaret broke the silence. "Sarah spoke of you often during our journey. She said you wrote beautifully about the land and your hopes for the future." Thomas felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm not much of a writer. Just try to be honest about life out here." She said, "You wrote about wanting to build something lasting. That takes courage in a place where nature fights you every step." "You sound like you understand frontier life," Thomas observed. "My family came from Ireland when I was 12, Margaret explained. "We tried farming in Kansas. Lost everything to drought and grasshoppers. After my parents died, I moved to Chicago, but I've always felt more at home in open country." As they crested a hill, Thomas's ranch came into view. The log house with stone foundation was surrounded by outbuildings, with cattle dotting the pastures that stretched toward distant mountains. "It's beautiful," Margaret said softly. "You've built something to be proud of." For the first time all day, Thomas smiled genuinely. "It's taken 8 years, but it's starting to feel like home. Come on, let's get you inside and have Mrs. Chun look at that ankle." 3 days had passed since Margaret's arrival at Prairie Wind Ranch. The initial awkwardness had settled into comfortable routine. Mrs. Chun, Thomas's Chinese housekeeper, had taken Margaret under her wing with gentle care. "You stay off that foot another day, Mrs. Chun said firmly while wrapping Margaret's ankle. "Swelling almost gone. But you push too hard. You make worse." Margaret nodded from her kitchen chair, though her restless energy was evident. The warm kitchen, with its copper pots and simmering stove, had become her temporary haven. I feel terrible just sitting while you and Mr. Mackenzie work, Margaret said. You help by healing properly, came Thomas's voice from the doorway. He entered with an armload of split wood. But if you're determined to be useful, I brought something from town. He retrieved a wrapped bundle. The school marm in Clearwater is moving to California. Town's looking for a replacement. Margaret unwrapped several textbooks, a slate, and writing materials. Her eyes lit up. These are wonderful, much more advanced than most frontier schools use. Mary Collins built quite a reputation, Thomas explained, pulling up a chair. Town folks are worried about finding a replacement. What ages would I teach? Margaret asked, examining the books. 6 to 16. Older boys only come in winter when there's less ranch work. Over the following days, Margaret and Thomas fell into evening conversations by the fire. She asked thoughtful questions about ranch life. He was fascinated by her teaching ideas. You really think children learn better when lessons apply to real life? Thomas asked one evening as Margaret mended his shirt while he worked on tack repair. Absolutely, Margaret replied. If you're teaching arithmetic to ranch children, use examples about feed costs or grazing calculations. They'll remember better when they understand practical applications. Thomas paused in his work. That makes sense. I struggled with numbers in school because they seemed abstract. But I can calculate profit margins because I use them daily. Exactly. Margaret's face lit with enthusiasm. For younger children, teach reading with frontier stories. Have them write about their experiences. Learning becomes meaningful when it connects to their world. Thomas found himself studying her animated expression. Over the past week, he'd come to appreciate not just her intelligence, but the quiet strength she'd shown traveling across the country to deliver difficult news to a stranger. Margaret, he said suddenly, then stopped. Yes, what you did, coming here personally instead of just sending a telegram. That took real character. Margaret set down her mending. I couldn't let you wait indefinitely for someone who was never coming. It wasn't right. Can I ask you something? Thomas said. Are you terribly heartbroken about Sarah? Thomas was quiet, staring into the fire. I was disappointed, maybe hurt she couldn't tell me herself. But honestly, I think I was more in love with the idea of having a wife than with Sarah specifically. We shared hopes through letters, but we didn't really know each other. Margaret nodded. Sarah said something similar. She realized she'd fallen in love with the romantic notion of frontier life rather than understanding what it really meant. Having you here has shown me what it's like to have someone to really talk with, Thomas said carefully. Someone who understands both the challenges and rewards of this life. The comment hung between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Margaret resumed sewing, but Thomas noticed her slight smile. The town council meets Thursday, Thomas said. If you're interested in the teaching position, I could introduce you to the school board. I'd like that very much, Margaret replied. And Thomas, thank you for everything. I know this isn't how you plan things, but I'm grateful to have landed somewhere I feel welcome. You are welcome here, Margaret. More welcome than you might realize. Outside, wind rattled the windows, but inside the warm kitchen, two strangers were discovering that sometimes the best things came from unexpected acts of kindness. 2 weeks later, Margaret stood before the Clearwater School Board in the meeting room above Peterson's General Store. After an hour of questions about her qualifications and teaching philosophy, Mayor Harrison leaned back in his chair. Miss O'Sullivan, your credentials are impressive, but what assurance do we have that you won't leave when a better opportunity comes along? Margaret had expected this. Mayor Harrison, in my weeks here, I found something I didn't expect when I left Chicago, a community where I truly belong. I want to build something lasting here, just as you all have done. Dr. Whitmore leaned forward. Tom Mackenzie speaks highly of you. Says you have practical sense with your book learning. Mr. Mackenzie has shown me what this community values: hard work, integrity, looking out for one another. Those are values I want to instill in the children. After a brief discussion, Mayor Harrison cleared his throat. Miss O'Sullivan, we'd like to offer you the position of schoolmistress beginning in 2 weeks, $40 monthly, plus housing above the schoolhouse. Margaret felt a surge of joy. I accept. Thank you for this opportunity. Outside, Thomas waited by his wagon. Well? He asked, though her expression gave the answer. I got the position, she said, excitement evident. Wonderful news, Thomas said with genuine pleasure. Clearwater's children are lucky to have you. As they began the journey home, Margaret felt oddly melancholy despite her success. The teaching position represented everything she'd hoped for, but it meant leaving the ranch, ending evening conversations, and shared meals. Thomas, she said as they crested the hill overlooking his property, these past weeks have been special. I'll miss our talks. Thomas was quiet, then pulled the wagon to a stop. Margaret, when you think about your future here, what do you see beyond teaching? Margaret considered carefully. Becoming part of the community, watching children grow, maybe expanding the school program. What? Thomas turned to face her fully. These weeks have shown me what I was really looking for when I wrote to Sarah. Not just a wife, but a partner, someone to share this life, make it richer. Someone I could talk to, plan with, build something with. Margaret's heart raced as she understood his meaning. I know this is sudden, Thomas continued, and we've only known each other briefly. But I've come to care for you, Margaret. More than care for you. Thomas, you don't have to answer now. Take the teaching position, settle in. But I want you to know my offer of a home wasn't just hospitality. If you ever decide you want to share your life with someone, I'd be honored if you'd consider me. Margaret looked at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who shared her values and dreams. Thomas Mackenzie, she said softly. I came to Wyoming to deliver news about another woman's change of heart. I never expected to discover my own heart changing. Hope filled his eyes. I accept your offer, but with a condition. That we take time getting to know each other properly. Build our relationship on the same foundation as this ranch, with patience, hard work, and honest communication. Thomas's face broke into a radiant smile. I wouldn't have it any other way. 6 months later, Margaret O'Sullivan Mackenzie stood dismissing her students from the Clearwater schoolhouse. Through the window, she saw Thomas approaching with their wagon. Goodbye, Mrs. Mackenzie, called Billy Thompson. See you tomorrow. Margaret gathered her materials and stepped outside to meet her husband. The spring air was warm and sweet, mountains standing proud against brilliant blue sky. How was school? Thomas asked, helping her into the wagon. Wonderful. Billy mastered long division, and Sarah Chun wrote a beautiful composition. And how is Mrs. Mackenzie feeling? Thomas asked gently, his hand briefly touching her stomach, where their first child grew. Very blessed, Margaret answered, leaning against his shoulder as they drove through the Wyoming landscape. Margaret thought about a letter from Sarah in Chicago. Her friend's marriage hadn't proven as wonderful as hoped. Her banker husband was kind but distant. Margaret felt only gratitude for the chain of events that brought her here. Sometimes the greatest adventures began not with grand plans, but with simple acts of kindness that opened unexpected doors. The Prairie Wind Ranch appeared as the sun set. Thomas helped Margaret down, and together they walked toward the house that had become their home, their future stretching ahead like the vast, promising landscape surrounding them. Love had found her not when she was looking for it, but when she was simply trying to do the right thing. Perhaps that was the most beautiful love story, one built on mutual respect, shared values, and the daily choice to care for each other through life's unexpected turns.